July 13 to 16, 1863, 4 days that turned Manhattan into a war zone and exposed the nation's deepest wounds. The summer air hung thick and heavy over New York City that Monday morning. Church bells had barely finished their calls when crowds began gathering at street corners across Manhattan. They weren't there to pray. They were there to burn the city down. The powder keg. Picture New York in 1863, a city bursting at the seams with 500,000 souls, many of them desperately poor Irish immigrants crammed into fetid tenement slums. The Civil War had been grinding on for 2 bloody years, and just weeks earlier, news had arrived of the carnage at Gettysburg, 23,000 Union casualties in 3 days. Then came the match to light the powder keg, the nation's first military draft lottery, set to begin that sweltering July morning. But this wasn't just any draft. It was selective. If you could scrape together $300, about $7,000 today, you could buy your way out. The wealthy could simply purchase a substitute to fight in their place. $300. For the Irish laborers earning $1 a day, it might as well have been $3 million. The message was clear and bitter. Rich man's war, poor man's fight. Day 1, the match strikes. At 10:30 a.m. on July 13, the mob descended on the draft office at 3rd Avenue and 46th Street. They weren't a faceless mass. These were firefighters from the Black Joke Engine Company No. 33, who had organized through the night. They smashed through the doors, destroyed the lottery wheel, doused the building in turpentine, and set it ablaze. The flames could be seen for miles, a signal fire calling the dispossessed to war. What began as a protest against conscription rapidly mutated into something far darker. The rioters' rage found a target, the city's black population. In the toxic logic of the moment, African Americans became the scapegoats, blamed for the war, seen as competition for jobs, dehumanized by decades of racist propaganda. The descent into hell, the violence that followed was medieval in its brutality. Black men were hunted through the streets. Some were beaten to death with paving stones. Others were hanged from lampposts, lynched in broad daylight while crowds cheered. The mob dragged the bodies through the streets, sometimes setting them on fire. The Colored Orphan Asylum on 5th Avenue, home to 233 black children, became a target. The rioters stormed the building, determined to burn it with the children inside. Superintendent William Davis and his staff managed to evacuate the children out the back just minutes before the mob torched the 4-story building. One girl, trapped and hiding, burned to death. Black families barricaded themselves in their homes or fled the city entirely. Some found refuge in police station houses. Others hid in alleys and cellars, listening to the howls of the mob prowling outside. The violence wasn't limited to African Americans. Anyone seen as an ally faced the mob's wrath. Abolitionists, wealthy Republicans, and Protestant missionaries were attacked. The rioters burned the mansion of the city's provost marshal. They destroyed the offices of Horace Greeley's Tribune, one of the most prominent anti-slavery newspapers. The city fights back. Police Superintendent John Kennedy tried to assess the situation on that first day. He was beaten so savagely by the mob that he was left for dead in the gutter, his face unrecognizable. He survived only because a passing citizen threw him in a wagon and rushed him to safety. But New York's police force, the Metropolitan Police, refused to break. They were outnumbered, perhaps 50,000 rioters against a force of just 2,300 officers, but they fought with desperate courage. Armed with heavy wooden clubs, they formed tight formations and charged into mobs 10 times their size. The city's volunteer firefighters split along class and ethnic lines. Some joined the riots, others fought them, defending black neighborhoods and battling the blazes the rioters set. The turning point. By the 3rd day, the city teetered on the edge of total collapse. Then salvation arrived, not from heaven, but from Gettysburg. 5 regiments of Union soldiers, still exhausted from the battle that had ended just 10 days earlier, were rushed to New York by train. These were hardened combat veterans who had faced Pickett's charge. They brought artillery with them. When they deployed on the streets, they didn't hesitate. When mobs refused to disperse, the soldiers opened fire. Not warning shots over heads, but grape shot and canister rounds directly into the crowds. It was shock and awe, urban warfare in the heart of America's largest city. On Gramercy Park, soldiers set up a howitzer and fired point blank into a mob. Bodies littered the elegant square. The message was unmistakable. The violence would end, one way or another. The aftermath. By Thursday, July 16, a heavy rain began to fall. Between the weather and the military firepower, the riots finally sputtered out. The city lay in ruins. Entire blocks had burned. The death toll remains uncertain. Official counts claimed 119 dead, but some historians believe the true number exceeded 1,000, with many black victims' deaths never recorded. The economic damage was catastrophic. Over $1 million in property destroyed, equivalent to tens of millions today. The human cost was incalculable. New York's black population plummeted from over 12,000 to fewer than 10,000, families fled and never returned. The bitter ironies. The draft resumed on August 19. This time, 10,000 soldiers stood guard. There were no riots. And here's the cruelest irony: many of the rioters would eventually be drafted and sent south. Some died wearing Union blue, fighting for the very cause they had rioted against, in a war to end slavery. The riots exposed fault lines that never fully healed: class warfare, racial hatred, the resentment of immigrants caught between poverty and prejudice. It was America's bloodiest civilian uprising, a dark mirror held up to a nation already tearing itself apart in civil war. In the end, the New York draft riots weren't really about the draft at all. They were about rage, the rage of the powerless, misdirected at those even more powerless than themselves. It's a story of how quickly civilization's veneer can crack, how fear and desperation can turn neighbors into monsters, and how the sins of inequality and racism can explode into fire and blood. The scars remained long after the ashes cooled. If you like this story, press the subscribe button for more videos. Share and like.